Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone, for sticking along here. We're now on the District 1 part of the night. I'm, again, Christopher Neely, Lookout's politics and policy reporter and author of the Public Interest newsletter, which comes out on Mondays. Okay, so we have District 1 tonight. The map of District 1, looking at it, honestly, it might be one of the more diverse districts in the city. It's northeastern. It's the northeasternmost district. Reaches up into the redwoods of De La Vega Park, down to the busy Water Street at the south, and then bound east and west by Arana Gulch and the San Lorenzo River. The district hosts the county jail, the city's largest homeless shelter, the Armory, the Emma Line Behavioral Health Campus, as well as San Lorenzo and Grant Park. Soquel Drive, Ocean, and Water Streets are some of the main corridors. With me today are two candidates vying to represent District 1 as its first directly elected city council representative. Now, district representation, the system went into place during the 2022 election, but the person currently in the District 1 seat was elected by the whole city, so technically she represents the whole city. This will be the first time that District 1 gets to directly elect their representative. So we have Gabriela Triguero and to my left, and David Tanasi. Gabriela is Executive Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Monterey Bay. She sits on the city's commission on prevention of violence against women. She has had experience working on Planned Parenthood's public policy team. She's a mother and a renter. Dave was born and raised in Santa Cruz. He works for the City of Santa Cruz Water Department, a member of the City Employees Union, SEIU 521, of which he became an informal spokesperson when the city employees were threatening to strike in 2022. So each candidate is going to have a 60-second intro. They're going to have 90 seconds to answer my questions. We'll take audience questions throughout as well, and then we'll end with another quick and fun lightning round. Again, please hold your applause. We want to get through as many questions as possible. We want to get to know these candidates, and we have to stop when there's applause. So just hold it till the end, and make it loud at the end. Just let it all loose. But at the end. All right, we'll start with Gabriela, 60-second intro.
Hi, I'm Gabriela Triguero, and I'm really happy and pleased to join fellow working moms that I saw come up here who are stepping up for city council, so I'm really proud to be one of them. As Chris mentioned, I'm executive director of Big Brothers Big Sisters here locally. I inherited a 40-year legacy with that agency, and I've been really proud to steward it into a new phase, serving now a tri-county area, so serving, in addition to Santa Cruz County, Monterey, and San Benito. You mentioned my commission. I'm really proud of that. That's reflective of my deep commitment to violence prevention. As a volunteer, as someone who lives in this community, I'm really, really proud to serve in that capacity, and I believe deeply in my fellow commissioners on the work that we're doing. And yes, I've been a volunteer for Moms Demand Action locally here, so I've organized events against violence prevention in that sense. And then I also am a volunteer at my son's school, so I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And Dave?
Thank you for having us. Absolutely. I'm absolutely joyful to be up here on stage with Gabby and all of y'all. And I want to first and foremost say, everyone, if you look to the back, there is a pack of city workers who spent their day working for the city, providing the services that we cherish, and they came on their own time to support this process. I'm using it as an example to state that is why I'm here. That level of engagement from each and every one of you, from all of the folks in our community, not only the individuals providing the services, but also all of us receiving them. I'm here to bring those voices forward. Inclusivity and understanding and mutual building towards a better future for Santa Cruz, for all of us in Santa Cruz, is what has me here before you today. So thank you for listening to my beautiful radio voice.
Thank you. Yeah, I like those snaps. That's a good way to express agreement or enthusiasm. Okay, so I'll just start with Gabriella. Question for both of you. Why do you want this job? Why do you want to sit on the city council? I mean, it requires a lot. It doesn't pay much. Attracts public scrutiny. Why do you want it now? Why do you think you're suited for it?
Sure. So I volunteer a lot, and for a long time I've been committed to public service, and this is an opportunity to scale that. So I would have to step off the CPVAW, but I would hope to bring those issues to the next level and represent the work that I've done. Additionally, this hasn't been an easy town for me to live in the 10 years that I've lived here. And so I did feel it was a calling to step up in this opportunity. Santa Cruz is a diverse and beautiful community, but within it, I've experienced othering and displacement. And yeah, it's wholly shaped my life, Santa Cruz has, but I'm deeply committed to the people that I work with. And I work alongside a lot of community partners in my nonprofit work and in my youth development work, and that's where I find my inspiration for what comes next. I also joked with someone recently that if I get hit by a bus, at least there'll be a small CalPERS for my son. But it is true, right? I'm a single mom. I represent, like many community members, someone who is living in a precarious situation at times, a vulnerable situation. My whole life absolutely changed with the 22 election. Shebra Kalantari Johnson gave me a 3-month contract. And so I know what little change can have such big impacts, and I'd like to pay that forward.
Thank you. Dave, why do you want this job?
I would say I was driven to this job through my leadership that was proven in the midst of our negotiations with city management for a fair contract representing dignity and respect for all of us as workers. When COVID hit, what we saw was the disparities grow even deeper between those of us in the community that were really already having a hard time, and those times were getting harder. So it was mentioned earlier about the development and hopefully soon to be expansion of the homeless response program. That was $14 million in ARPA funds. Many of us were at the time pining for those funds, and bringing that voice to the conversation is absolutely critical and important in this process. So I'm running for that. I'm running because my background in biology gives me an innate understanding of the importance of long-term planning, to the West Cliff project that was discussed before, to the water sources that Susie touched on with the San Lorenzo River, and longevity of our water security. My time as a laborer, the man who put me to work and taught me most all of it is sitting in the back. He can't hear me that well. There's a smile. All right, it logged. And that labor has given me an understanding of the trials and tribulations that we face as working families in this community. Bringing that voice forward to be at the table with an absolutely strong and valiant fighter is integral, and that's why you find me here today.
Thanks, Dave. You've talked a lot about wanting to be a champion for working families. Concretely, how do you see yourself kind of fitting into that role? What does a champion for working families look like as far as what you'll support on the dais, how you'll vote, and how you'll be as a city council member?
Absolutely. So great question. What we're talking about here is becoming the bosses of the folks who deploy city services. So with respect to working families, we don't have city services if we don't have workers. So recruitment and retention for our city organization, first and foremost. Secondly, working families mean bringing inclusive voices forward. So when the discussion is being held, if not everyone is at the table, then how is it that we know that we're meeting the needs of the entirety of our community? How is it that we know that we're meeting creative solutions for our very complex problems? What we've been listening to this entire evening is that what we're facing is difficulty. And it's not straightforward. It's not black and white. We like to make this false dichotomy, but what we really know is the hard work is pushing through the layers of complexity, forming solutions as a team, and starting first and foremost with respect and dignity for all of the members involved. So with respect to being champion, I'm thinking about recruitment and retention. I'm kind of running through it here in a monologue. I apologize. But we got recruitment and retention. We got pretty much what we consider bread and butter issues. And I think the fact that we can bring forward the needs of small business workers, day-to-day quality of life issues, parking costs for city services and city workers downtown. We're talking granular elements, and that's where I'll be the voice at the table of leadership.
Thank you. Gabriella, you talked about your experience being othered. I know you've done some equity work. How do you see that kind of playing into being a city council member? I mean, how do you influence the community as a city council member, given your experience with equity work and knowing what it's like to be othered? Where do you start with that? How do you address that as a city council member?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. In our violence prevention work, we talk a lot about increasing safe spaces and making safe spaces. And safe spaces isn't just about physical safety, it's about a sense of belonging and inclusivity, like Davis talked about. Those items are really important to me. It's also about the next generation that witnesses us have this discourse, and that also may feel othering, whether it's bullying that happens in a meeting or bullying on a schoolyard or bullying in a home. People experiencing unsafe situations can be in a park, a school, or their own residence. So I think for me, maintaining a steadfast commitment towards amplifying voices of vulnerable communities and making sure to have responsive policies related to those vulnerable communities is essential to me, whether it be youth or veterans that I worked with a long time in this county. Dave and I were both essential workers, I believe, during the pandemic. And I think resiliency of essential workers is something that needs to be protected. I think we were all blown away on how the community came together during the pandemic, and as we walk away from that, we're forging new connections. In my master's degree, I did my master's at Mills College in Oakland, which is a women-led and queer-led university or college, and it informed the pedagogy, it informed the culture. And I feel that very much alive in my commission work and in my youth work and in pride work. And I think that that is what I'd like to be bringing to the city council to spread amongst the community there.
Great, thank you. So Dave, we'll go to you. Everyone else has been asked this question. How do you plan to vote on Measure M?
Should we just make M as more for Measure M? Because we're going to keep talking about Measure M.
Sure.
All right, let's see. So with respect to Measure M, I want to start first and foremost what we know and what we don't know. So I'm not going to sit up here and postulate what is going to happen or what isn't going to happen. What we do know is that both sides of the debate have very good people with a very strong interest to meet the needs for affordability and security for housing for the future of our community. I'm going to take that and run with it. I want to be the champion that sits at the dais, no matter which way M goes, and is able to lead our community through the complex challenges and technical elements of building affordable housing for our future. So I think there's a very palpable feeling that needs to be discussed, that our community is clear that they don't see themselves in a seat at the table. So specific to our area, we have a number of projects that are currently in the pipeline. 908 Ocean, 150 Felker, 831 Water, 917 Water. Each of those projects has a layer of complexity to them that requires actual understanding of the processing and the relationships and where to find the funding to make those projects meet the need of affordability and sustainability for housing.
So how will you vote?
Me personally,
Yeah.
it's a personal matter.
Well, you are going to be a city council member, and you know part of Measure M coming up is this feeling that there's a lack of transparency in knowing where city council members stand, and not knowing, you know, and the argument against Measure M is that direct democracy should be at the ballot box, and voting for their elected officials and knowing where they stand. So. I'll ask you one more time. How do you plan to
No,
vote?
it's an excellent question. So this gets down to the bottom of it. So it's really not a question of data. It's not. I'm a biologist. I understand data. It's a question of ethics and philosophy. And I understand there's a time limit, but
Yeah.
I'm not willing to get pigeonholed into taking a commitment on one side or the other because we put each other in boxes when we do that.
Okay.
And it's not fair to recognize the discussion.
Do you know how you're going to vote?
I do not actually know how I'm going to vote sitting currently on Measure M.
Okay. Gabriella, same question.
I'll be voting no on Measure M.
Okay.
Like Dave, I love data. My master's was in policy analysis, and like a couple of other people who've been up on that stage, on the stage, they've mentioned the reports that have come out. I echo that. I also am firm. I want to see the numbers of affordable housing units, not percentages necessarily. There's not a correlation, although we'd love it to be, right? But I think a lot of my neighbors are divided on this, and as is Dave, right, in our district. And I recognize that housing for all is a great belief and that we do want more. And you mentioned that we're going to need about 5 times the housing built from the previous 8 years. It is going to be a bit of whiplash at times for this community to get to that place. But I don't think that Measure M is written in such a way that does truly support the community as its needs.
Thank you. So, yeah, absolutely. You may. Yep. Do you want to?
I can?
Yeah, you can. Go ahead.
All right. So, awesome. Thank you. I think we're both on the same side of me in affordable housing here. So real quick to unpack it, what we're talking about in RENA that was driven by AMBAG that brings us to where we are now. In our current zoning, we actually are going to be able to almost meet the 500% increase in the next 8-year cycle relative to our previous one. And so we know that's on the table. With respect to the San Francisco article that everyone wants to bring up in sight, there's elements of San Francisco that are explicitly different than our community. Has to do with density, has to do with other tenant protection elements that allow that. Now I want to be very clear, we don't know that San Francisco is slashing by 50% their inclusionary requirements for what are known as pipeline projects has an outcome because those projects are in the pipeline. So we can't actually stipulate that slashing by 50% is going to increase affordability. So just real quick, 25% it went up to as an inclusionary requirement, so that means slash to 12.5%. There isn't any data except what we have by a public institution known as the Controller's Office, and the Controller explicitly says, relative to that slashing, that it will not meet the, quote, penciling out that developers speak to. So again, this is not a black and white situation.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. So let's say Measure M doesn't pass, and if you were in the room, I asked this before, but let's say Measure M doesn't pass, and but the current kind of 12-story height limits, 20% net affordability requirement put on, these conditions put on by City Council last year, let's say that proves to not pencil out for the developers. I know we love that term, pencil out. Are you open to continuing to negotiate to maybe increase those building heights or lower the affordability threshold in order to make that project work? Again, that 20% that City Council has put on it is technically, I think, is greater because they want a 20% net. It wouldn't be 20% base density. Or would you view this project as just dead if the developers say they can't make a pencil out? We'll start with Dave.
There's, okay, let's see. First and foremost, the term penciling out, yes, we love it. For those that don't know, Sandy Brown brought forward a very important article of discussion, which is, what is it that they mean by that? Where is it that those books have been opened up in a transparent process so that we as a community can understand that what they're saying as penciling out, that they and us mean the same thing? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Your question was about
Yeah.
measure.
No problem. And we'll stop the clock for a second. The question is, if the project in its current iteration does not work for developers. Now, the city council put these conditions on the project. We don't know if it will actually work. If the developers say that this cannot work, we cannot build the downtown expansion plan in its current vision, are you open to negotiating that project into a vision that will make it work for developers so we get those units, we get that affordability, and we get a downtown expansion plan?
Yeah, thank you for reiterating. I think committing to developers that want to build in our community specifically, not as something that's a prospective earnings, but because they're actually committed to the process of generating new housing and affordable housing units, those are the kind of relationships we want to continue to build. We want to find the funding necessary to fill the gap to meet the affordability requirements that our community has said we so desperately need. And if we look back, the definition of affordable, just to be clear here, many of you may remember the article in the San Francisco Chronicle last year that spoke to the fact that relative to rental median market and median wages, Santa Cruz is now the most expensive community to live in the entire nation. Now, that is $62 an hour. If you make under $130,000 a year, you are considered low income, and thus that is who we're speaking to when we're talking about the need for affordable housing in our community. So negotiating with developers, negotiating with the project, of course, this process will not be black and white, as I've said. It's a matter of meeting the need of our community, not squashing their voice, and also moving forward with developing units into the future.
Thank you, Dave. Gabriella, do you want me to repeat the question, or you got it?
No, absolutely. No, I would continue the conversation and the negotiation. I think one of the important things about these projects and whatever actors come forward is that we continue to make sure to have the best person on that side of the deal that we can for this community. And if it takes going further up with height, then it takes going further up. That's how you get more affordable units and drive it down. I would say, you know, ironically, I've been kind of on the other end of that. When I worked in the cannabis industry, I was one of those people vying for a contract with the city. I was trying to get a license with, you know, and there is a whole host of people that will come forward for a business deal, right? And I happen to be with a local community group of service-disabled combat veterans that were moving forward their idea about a community benefit. And the city of Capitola gave us that license. We were vastly different than the lobbyists and lawyers that were coming up against us. So I would just say it would always be a continued negotiation, a continued conversation, and key interested parties from the city will always voice, and I urge them to continue that. We have incredible affordable housing leaders in our community, and I would say a lot of those groups are no on M, but they're not opposed to sustainable growth.
60-second answers so I can get through a little bit fewer questions, or more questions. This one's from the audience. Can you talk more about the experience you've had in housing in Santa Cruz and what we need to create safe space? We'll start with Gabriella.
My experience in housing has been a difficult one. I've talked about it in some community meetings. I have been homeless in this community. I have been displaced in this community. And I now am a renter in this community. Like Dave mentioned, we are in the most expensive rental market in the nation. That's not an easy burden for the average person to bear, let alone a vulnerable person. Whether they be a single working parent, someone who has English as a second language, or they're experiencing some sort of family emergency or trauma or change in job. So, nonetheless, it's intrinsically valuable to me. It's shaped my whole life, my experience with housing. My son goes to school and told a story to his kindergarten last year about a rat eating his Christmas gift. And he experiences it differently than me, but I don't want any other children or families to experience that, so I would promote more rental inspections.
Thank you. Dave, your experience with housing in Santa Cruz and how do we create more safe space?
I'm such a laborer that my first thought was housing. I built housing. I literally, before coming to the city, did the 180 exterior doors of the Hilltop Apartments. So that would be one side of housing. In hearing the answer, I'm thinking, oh no, this is more the personal element of shelter. So my path to where we are now started with meeting the need of the unhoused in District 1. I live right off of Upper Ocean. It's quite a active passageway moving from the river community to the services at Emmeline. So in direct aid and direct benefit to the unhoused community is where I started. Recognizing their needs, especially moving into COVID, is what catapulted me to be driven to find myself on this stage with these fine folks before you. So that is an intimate relationship directly related to the unhoused. Now, building housing is one thing. My current work in the water department with my cohorts in the back there, we're intimately involved in the commercial development of downtown and all of the water department, which stretches out to 41st. The point being that meeting the need and seeing the changes and the intricacies and complexities of that housing development is something that I'm very familiar with.
Thank you. Okay, this is another audience question, 60 seconds. Dave, we'll start with you. The Santa Cruz County Childhood Advisory Council has found that only 26% of the demand for childcare is being met for children under the age of 2. That's a pretty astounding number. Something we see across the U.S., but a very local issue. How can the city help to address the childcare crisis impacting our working families?
Coming up with a local, consistent source of funding to address that need is step number one. There's a mechanical lever that can be pulled by City Council directly to affect that. Also, the reality that what we consider care and how we are able to deliver that care needs to be changed. A lot of it is done with what I would consider spaces that are retrofitted, reformatted from, say, a single-family home to now childcare facilities, which is great to meet a very pressing and very present need. My niece and sister-in-law lived with us for a year, and my niece received childcare from a spot right up the street. So it was nice that we were able to walk there, but we know that the numbers of oversight adults to children is absolutely grotesque. And so the fact that we need to expand upon it is something that needs to be addressed.
Thanks. And Gabriella.
Absolutely. In addition, great points, Dave. I would say that, I mean, I've had my son on a waiting list for after-school care at the local elementary school for 2 years now. So I recognize that we have a deficit there. Some of that is when you talk about the under 2 and younger ages before they would matriculate into our school systems. That is true, and you know, increased licensure for at-home care is something that I think we could all support, neighborhood care. But yeah, I think we have to increase funding and ensure that each of our schools, public schools, has consistent aftercare. Many of the families have multiple kids, right? So they're hoping to keep their kid at the public school until 5 while they might be doing, you know, other things. Lastly, I would say that the cost of care is very difficult. One of the things that I do with Big Brothers Big Sisters, I'll be very quick, besides our one-to-one youth mentoring program, is we do site mentoring. So it's group mentorship at a site. We do it at low-income apartment buildings, and it would be great if some of those contracts for affordable housing would include childcare.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to the lightning round, and then we'll finish up. So I want you guys to be as concrete in 60 seconds as possible here. As a city council member, you'll have the latitude to work with the mayor and other city council members to bring items to the city council's agenda. What are 3, if you can think of 3, initiatives, policy directions, or ideas you plan to propose, put your name on it, and bring to the dais during your first term? Please be as concrete as possible. We'll start with Gabriella.
Sure. I'd like to bring something achievable. I'd like to, one, cancel all application fees for rentals. I'd, two, like to propose a universal bilingual application that would be standard across the county for tenant protections in line with that. And I would say, three, I'd love to explore pooling our city's PTA money to be spread equitably amongst the schools rather than staying with the school it was fundraised from.
Wow, thank you. All right, Dave.
Absolutely. Like I said, again, without our workers, we don't have city services. So first and foremost, I'm looking to address the recruitment and retention issues that brought us to the place where we found ourselves in 2022. What that means is prioritizing our budgeting so that our workers are found as our greatest asset as opposed to how they've been treated historically, which is our greatest liability. So that's number one. Number two, expansion and secure support for our homeless response program. The work that those folks have been doing, the effectiveness of their wraparound services and direct contact is unparalleled in terms of quality of life delivered by the city. So one, number two. Number three is expanding multimodal access. So this is bike lanes, walking pathways, places for the kids to ride their scooters while you walk, whether that's Pacific Avenue or a continuation of the Soquel buffered bike lanes in partnership with the county. They're doing 5.5 miles of protected bike lanes with 23 lit crossings for the road. It ends at Soquel at Harbor High. We can pick that up right there and run it all the way downtown through the remainder of the corridor.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, all right, we're gonna move to the lightning round super quick. Now remember, just don't even think about these. Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay, reality TV or game show choice, Dave?
Jeopardy.
What? That's, I'll
Which
keep
one
it
is
there.
that?
I'll
Which
keep it
one
there.
is that?
Yep, keep it there, whatever that is, yeah. All right. Okay, favorite walk in the district? Gabby. Yeah, favorite walk to go on in the district, yeah. Oh yeah, Mike, thank you. And you can repeat your answer for reality TV.
Yeah, I like walking. Oh, for reality, yeah.
In the mic.
That I'm chismosa, so I like reality TV. But my favorite walk right now is walking to John Franks Park from my home. I pass Monterey Boulevard, which is a bit trepidatious at times with my son, but literally my favorite walk.
Great,
right now.
Dave?
My favorite walk is the loop. I go down Glenwood and up past May, and the reason is I literally stop in on all the older folks in my neighborhood. I'm known as the mayor for checking on their sump pumps, sweeping out the drop inlets, taking the dog for a walk to meet the other dogs, which we met at Grant Street Park the other day. That was a hoot.
Okay. All right. Favorite fresh produce, Gabriella?
Strawberries, the smell of those fields, yes.
Yes. Dave?
Lilikoi.
What was that?
Lilikoi.
Lilikoi.
Passion fruit. We actually have a couple varietals that grow here in Santa Cruz.
Wow. All right. What time do you guys wake up in the morning, Dave?
I don't sleep much, so I'm pretty much up well before the sun rises and usually in the ocean in some capacity.
Fantastic. Gabriella?
Yeah, Dave and I share this. I'm up around 4 a.m. Like, I wake up and I there's an email. So I get 2 hours of work done before my son gets up.
Wow.
It's nice.
Incredible. And last question, first paying job, Gabriella?
I was a dancer. I was a flamenco dancer, so a performing artist.
Oh, that's great. Dave?
My first paying job. Most of my first work wasn't paid. It was real labor.
When did you get your first dollar?
My first dollar was probably at 14. I was a pool lifeguard.
All right, right on. All right, everyone, let's give them a round of applause.